Commander Reese Lawson pointed at the gate and said 4 words that would change everything. Leave by sundown, now. Captain Sloan Garrett did not move. She had been at this facility for 4 months. She had trained 19 dogs in that time. She had watched 7 veterans take their first full breath in years when the right animal pressed against their leg and told them without words that they were not alone anymore. And now a Navy SEAL in a press suit with a federal reassignment order was standing in the middle of the kennel yard telling her to be gone in 12 hours. That was when the first dog stood up. Rex, 12 years old, Belgian Malinois, retired from active service 3 years ago after 9 years of operational work in places the government still would not name in public documents. He had been asleep in his usual spot on the east side of the yard, where the morning sun came through the fence at the angle he preferred. Then he was not asleep. He was standing with his gray muzzle pointed toward the 2 men at the gate, and every line of his body communicating the message his body had been trained to communicate for 9 years before retirement. Something is coming, and it is not what it says it is. Then the second dog stood, then the third, then all 24 of them. No barking, no growling, just standing in a line facing the gate like a wall that had decided it was not moving for anyone. Sloan put down the feed bucket and looked at the men. The first was mid-50s, civilian suit, federal contractor badge on his lapel that she recognized as the classification level used by the Department of Defense Base Realignment Office. The second man was younger, 35 maybe, physical in the way that SEALs were physical, like every movement had been calculated for efficiency before it happened. Short, dark hair, jaw set with the practiced control of someone who had learned to manage his face in environments where your expression was information the enemy could use. He was looking at the facility with the systematic assessment of someone cataloging assets and square footage, not visiting, evaluating. Sloan walked to the gate before they reached it. Her right shoulder still ached where the bullet had gone through 6 months ago in Kandahar province. The scar tissue pulled when she raised her arm above 90 degrees. She had learned not to do that. Sloan Garrett, she said. She did not ask who they were. They already knew who she was, or they would not be here. Ms. Garrett, the contractor, had the practiced warmth of someone who delivered difficult news regularly and had made peace with it. I'm Gerald Hoffman, DoD Base Realignment and Closure Office. This is Commander Reese Lawson, Naval Special Warfare Command. I know who you are, Sloan said. She looked at Lawson. I got the preliminary notice 6 weeks ago. The owner filed a response. We haven't received acknowledgement. Your response is being reviewed, Hoffman said. Then why are you here before the review is complete? Hoffman and Lawson exchanged the specific glance of 2 men who had rehearsed this conversation and were now in the portion of it that had not gone the way they planned. Lawson stepped forward. Up close, he was younger than she had estimated, mid-30s. His eyes were careful eyes, the eyes of someone who was good at his job and was currently doing a part of his job he did not particularly enjoy. Ms. Garrett, he said, this facility has been designated for federal repurposing effective end of this fiscal quarter. The timeline has been accelerated. The new compliance date is 30 days from today. Sloan looked at him for a long moment. Her hands were very still at her sides. A sniper's hands. Hands that had learned not to move unless the movement served a purpose. 30 days, she said. Yes, ma'am. There are 24 dogs on this property, she said. 17 of them are active service animals in formal placement partnerships with veterans in this region. 3 of them are in medical rehabilitation following service injuries. 4 of them are in final evaluation for placement. She kept her voice even, the same voice she had used on Overwatch when she was calling corrections to her spotter and needed him to hear the information without the emotional weight that would make him second-guess the shot. What is your plan for those animals? The placement partnerships can be transferred to other certified facilities, Hoffman said. There are 3 accredited programs within the state. The nearest one is 4 hours from the nearest veteran it currently serves, Sloan said. The man who works with Ranger every Tuesday has a traumatic brain injury and cannot drive. His wife brings him. They have been coming here every Tuesday for 2 years. Ranger is the reason Marcus sleeps at night. The first time he slept more than 3 hours in 4 years was in this yard with that dog. She paused just long enough to let that land. What is the plan for that? Accommodation arrangements can be made on a case-by-case basis, Hoffman said. Sloan turned and walked back into the kennel. She heard Lawson's footsteps on the gravel behind her. She did not slow down. Miss Garrett, his voice had the compressed quality of someone trying to manage a situation that was degrading faster than the script allowed for. I understand this is difficult. Do you? The facility assessment shows the property sits on 11 acres of federal land under a lease that expires this calendar year. The DoD has a repurposing directive for this parcel that has been in the federal planning process for 3 years. Sloan stopped walking. She turned to face him. Behind him, the 24 dogs had not moved. They were still standing in that line, still watching. I've been working at this program for 4 months, she said. The woman who runs it has been doing this for 41 years. She has trained 219 dogs. 63 of them served in active military deployments. 41 of them came back to her when their handlers did not. She let that sit in the air between them. I know what federal planning processes look like. I know what repurposing directives look like. What I want to know is what the land is being repurposed for. Lawson said nothing. That's interesting, Sloan said, because Gerald Hoffman from the DoD Base Realignment Office usually leads with the repurposing rationale. The fact that he's standing at the gate instead of in here explaining it to me suggests that the repurposing rationale is not something that plays well when the person receiving the news asks a direct question. Lawson's jaw tightened. A fractional movement, barely visible. But Sloan had spent 2 tours in Afghanistan reading faces across distances where a fractional movement was the difference between a hostile and a civilian, and she saw it clearly. The repurposing details are in the official notification package, he said. I read the notification package. It listed the rationale as federal infrastructure development. That's language that covers everything from a parking structure to a data facility. She looked at him directly. Who is the contractor? That information is in the secondary documentation, which will be provided at the 30-day mark. So I find out who's taking this land on the day I have to be off it. That's what you're telling me. Lawson's voice shifted. The specific shift of someone setting down a script and speaking from their own position. Ms. Garrett, I am not here to argue the policy. I am here because the compliance notice requires a site visit and a personal delivery of the accelerated timeline. I understand that this program matters. I understand the work that gets done here. And I am telling you that the timeline is 30 days, and it is not something I have discretion to change. Get out, Sloan said. It came out very quiet. Right now, you've delivered your notice. You can send the secondary documentation to the owner's attorney. Lawson looked at her. He looked around the kennel at the runs, at the 24 dogs who had been watching this entire exchange with the alert, unified attention of animals who processed human emotional information at a bandwidth that humans routinely underestimated. He looked at Rex, who had followed Sloan from the yard and was standing 3 feet behind her with his graying muzzle and his retirement calm brown eyes that were not calm right now. He looked back at Sloan. 30 days, Ms. Garrett, he said. He turned and walked back toward the gate. Sloan stood in the middle of the kennel and listened to his footsteps on the gravel and felt 4 months and 219 dogs and 11 acres of federal land sitting in her chest at a weight that was significant and was not going to produce any visible result because she had not cried at an obstacle since she was 17 years old. And she was not going to start today. Then Rex pressed his head against her left hand. He did not bark. He did not whine. He just put his large gray head against her palm with the weight and warmth of a dog who had been reading the people in this facility for 12 years and had identified his handler's current status and had decided to address it in the specific way available to him. Sloane put her hand on his head and held it there. "Not in 30 days," she said very quietly to nobody in particular. "Not in 30 years." 6 months earlier, Sloane Garrett had been in a different kind of fight. The coordinates were classified. The operation name was classified. Even the country was technically classified, though anyone who had been paying attention to troop movements in late 2023 knew exactly where the 3rd Infantry Division was operating and what they were doing there. What was not classified was what happened when Sloane's spotter called out movement in the compound below their position, and she acquired the target through her scope and saw 30 men with weapons moving toward a pinned-down Marine squad that had walked into an ambush and had about 4 minutes before they were overrun. She fired the first shot at 0647 hours. She fired the last shot at 0726 hours. 12 confirmed kills in 40 minutes. The Marine squad extracted with 0 casualties. Sloane took a 7.62 millimeter round through her right shoulder at 0729 hours when she stood up to reposition, and a Taliban sniper she had not seen put a round through the gap in her body armor where the plate carrier met the shoulder strap. The bullet went through cleanly, no bone damage, no nerve damage, just muscle and tissue, and the kind of pain that made you understand in a very concrete way that your body was a thing that could be broken, and that you had been very lucky that this particular breaking had not been worse. They medevaced her to Bagram, then to Landstuhl, then to Walter Reed. The wound healed. The shoulder did not. Not completely, not in the way the Army needed it to heal, for her to return to active duty as a sniper, where you needed to be able to hold a rifle steady for hours and make shots at distances where a quarter-inch of muscle tremor meant missing your target and maybe getting someone killed. The Army offered her an instructor position at Fort Benning, teaching the next generation of snipers. Good pay, good benefits, advancement opportunities, everything a soldier could want when their body decided they were done with the field work. Sloane said no. She said it politely. She said it with the appropriate gratitude for the offer, but she said no. Because standing in front of a classroom teaching 19-year-olds how to kill people at 800 meters was not what she needed. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She had killed enough people in 2 tours. She had gotten very good at it, good enough that they wanted her to teach other people how to be good at it. But what she needed right now was not to be good at killing. What she needed was to figure out what came after that. She found Iron Ridge facility by accident, or maybe not accident, maybe the specific kind of not accident that happens when you are not looking for something, but you are open to finding it, and the universe, or luck, or whatever you want to call it, puts it in front of you at exactly the moment you are ready to see it. Sloane had been staying with her sister in Richmond, temporary, just until she figured out what was next. Her sister worked at the VA hospital and knew Margaret Calloway from some veterans advocacy work they had done together years ago. Maggie ran a service dog program about 40 minutes outside Richmond. Small operation, 11 acres, 24 dogs. Chronic understaffing because the work was hard and the pay was minimal. And most people who were good at training dogs could make more money doing literally anything else. Maggie needed someone who could handle the advanced behavioral work, someone who understood trauma and patience, and the kind of discipline it took to build trust with something that had been broken. Sloane's sister suggested she call Maggie. Sloane called Maggie. 3 days later, she was standing in the kennel at Iron Ridge, watching a 12-year-old Belgian Malinois named Rex demonstrate the specific body language that meant he had identified a PTSD trigger in his handler and was positioning himself to provide grounding pressure. "How does he know?" Sloane asked. Maggie smiled. "Same way you knew where that sniper was before you could see him. Pattern recognition. Microsignals. Rex has been doing this for 12 years. He reads people better than most therapists." Sloan watched Rex work. The dog moved with the calm precision of a professional. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just presence and pressure applied at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. I was a sniper, Sloan said. Observation and patience, reading terrain and wind and 1,000 tiny variables that add up to whether you make the shot or miss it. Then you already know how to do this, Maggie said. Same skills, different application. Sloan stayed for one afternoon, then 1 week, then 1 month, then 4 months. She learned that training service dogs was exactly like being a sniper in all the ways that mattered. You watched, you waited, you read the small signals. You built trust through consistency and presence. You understood that the work was never about you. It was about the mission. And the mission here was giving broken people a reason to keep going. Marcus Teller came to the facility every Tuesday. He was 44 years old, 2 tours in Afghanistan, Helmand Province, 2012. Improvised explosive device hit his convoy. He survived. 3 of his Marines did not. He came home with a traumatic brain injury that had taken his short-term memory and given him back anxiety and chronic pain and the specific exhaustion of a man who had not slept more than 3 consecutive hours in 4 years. His wife drove him 2 hours each way every Tuesday because the VA waitlist for service dog programs in their area was 18 months long, and Marcus did not have 18 months. He had days. Hard days that stretched into harder weeks, and the kind of grinding survival that was not really living. The first time Sloan watched Marcus work with Ranger, she timed it on her phone without really meaning to. Just old habits. A sniper's need to quantify everything. Marcus sat in a yard chair. Ranger, a German shepherd with the calm presence of a dog who knew exactly what his job was, crossed the space and laid himself across Marcus's legs. Full body contact, weight and warmth and pressure. Marcus's breathing slowed. His shoulders dropped. His hands, which had been gripping the chair arms, relaxed. 11 minutes later, he was asleep. 11 minutes. The first time Marcus had slept more than 3 hours in 4 years. Sloan stood there for a full minute afterward, just absorbing the fact of it. This was what she had been looking for without knowing she was looking for it. Not teaching people how to kill, teaching them how to save each other. She had found what came next. Colonel Brennan Stafford came to the facility every Saturday. He was 66 years old, Desert Storm veteran, tank commander, 1st Armored Division. He had 3 rows of ribbons on his Class A uniform when he wore it, and a Purple Heart from an engagement outside Basra in 1991 that he did not talk about much. He had been Margaret Calloway's late husband's best friend. Derek Calloway had run Iron Ridge for 38 years before cancer took him 2 years ago. Wolf Stafford had promised Derek he would keep an eye on the program. Keep an eye on Maggie. Make sure the mission continued. He came every Saturday. He walked the grounds. He talked to the veterans. He watched the dogs work. And after 4 months, he started talking to Sloan. Not small talk. Not the social pleasantries that civilians used to fill silence. Real talk. The kind that happened between people who had seen the same things in different wars and recognized each other as members of the same tribe. "You're not hiding here," Wolf said one Saturday afternoon. They were sitting on the kennel steps watching Patricia Quinn walk the perimeter with her border collie mix, Luna. Patricia was 61, retired Army nurse, PTSD that had narrowed her world to the dimensions of her apartment for 2 years before her VA counselor brought her to Iron Ridge. Now she was walking, slow, steady circles. The gradual reclamation of ground that happened when a person was given the right conditions and enough time. "I'm not hiding," Sloan said. "I'm recovering." "Same thing sometimes," Wolf said. "But not for you. You're not recovering. You're training." Training for what? Whatever comes next. He said it with the certainty of someone who had seen enough soldiers transition out of combat to recognize the difference between someone who was done and someone who was just catching their breath. Sloan did not argue with him. She had learned that Wolf Stafford said what he meant and meant what he said, and arguing with him was like arguing with terrain. You could disagree with it all you wanted, but it was not going to change. Rex had started following Sloan around the facility sometime in the third month. She did not remember when it started exactly. Just that one day she looked around and noticed that the dog who had been Margaret Calloway's constant shadow for 12 years was now 3 feet behind her everywhere she went. "He's never done that before," Maggie said one afternoon. They were in the office going over placement documentation for a new veteran intake. Rex was lying at Sloane's feet instead of Maggie's. "Done what?" "Chosen someone else. He's been my dog since he retired, slept in my room, followed me everywhere. Now he follows you. Should I tell him to go back to you?" "No," Maggie smiled. "Dogs know things we don't. If Rex decided you're his person now, there's a reason." Sloane looked down at the gray muzzle resting on her boot, the brown eyes that were watching her with the patient attention of an animal who had decided she was worth monitoring. "What reason?" "Don't know yet," Maggie said, "but we'll find out." They found out when the black SUV came through the gate. It was a Thursday, late afternoon. Sloane was in the kennel doing the end-of-day feeding routine. 24 dogs. 24 carefully measured portions, 24 individual dietary requirements that had to be tracked and adjusted and monitored because these were working animals, and working animals needed precision care. Rex went rigid. He had been lying in his usual spot near the feed prep area, calm, relaxed, the posture of a retired professional who had earned the right to spend his afternoons in the sun. Then he was not relaxed. He was standing with his head toward the access road, and every line of his body communicating the specific message his body had been trained to communicate for 9 years of operational work before retirement. Something is coming, and it is not what it says it is. Sloane put down the feed scoop and looked at the road. The SUV was government issue, black, clean Virginia plates, the kind of nondescript federal vehicle that was designed to communicate official authority without announcing specific agency. It came through the gate at a speed that was slightly too fast for a courtesy visit and slightly too slow for an emergency, which put it in the category of a visit where the people inside already knew what they were going to say and had already decided how it was going to go. 2 men got out. Hoffman, Lawson. And everything that happened next happened because Rex had known, before any of the humans did, that something was wrong. Sloane's phone rang 4 hours after Hoffman and Lawson left. She was in the office with Maggie and Maggie's attorney, Carol Winters, going through the notification package, line by line, with the focused attention of 2 women who had spent enough time reading federal documents to know exactly which words meant what they said and which ones meant something else. The number was a Virginia area code she did not recognize. "Sloane Garrett," she answered. "Miss Garrett," the voice was young, direct, carrying the specific energy of someone who had been waiting to make this call. "My name is Kit Brennan. I'm an investigative reporter with the Appalachian Tribune. I've been covering the federal land repurposing directive in your county for 6 months. I want to ask you about Howcrest Industries and what they plan to build on the 11 acres where your program currently operates." Sloane's hand tightened on the phone. "I don't know that name." "I know you don't," Kit Brennan said. "That's why I'm calling you now, and not in 30 days when it would be too late for either of us to do anything useful about it." Carol Winters looked up from the notification package and read Sloane's expression and reached across the desk for her own legal pad. "Tell me," Sloane said. Kit Brennan told her. Howcrest Industries was a defense and infrastructure development company incorporated 18 months ago in Delaware with a registered agent address and no public-facing executive profile. It had been awarded a federal land repurposing contract for 11 acres in 3 Virginia counties. All 3 parcels previously occupied by veteran support or therapeutic service programs. All 3 cleared within a fiscal quarter of the contract award. All three scheduled for the same type of development, a data facility footprint with a federal security designation that sealed the construction details from public records review. The contract value on the three parcels combined was $480 million. Who awarded the contract? Sloan asked. That's the question, Kit said. The contracting authority routes through the DoD Infrastructure Office. The officer of record on all three contract awards is a Rear Admiral named Richard Vance, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command. Sloan looked at Carol. Carol was already writing. Commander Lawson, Sloan said, the man who delivered our notice today, where does he fit? Naval Special Warfare Command is attached to NAVFAC on a joint assignment detail, Kit said. He works under Vance's operational authority. That's why he was the one they sent. A pause. Miss Garrett, the story I'm developing is that Howcrest Industries is a shell contracting entity with beneficial ownership that traces to three individuals with existing DoD contracts worth a combined $2 billion. Vance awarded the repurposing contracts to an entity in which he has an undisclosed financial interest. The veteran service programs being displaced are collateral damage. The target is the land and the development contract value. Sloan sat very still. She sat in the specific stillness of a woman who had spent 2 years learning to remain absolutely motionless in a sniper hide while processing information that required action because action required clarity and clarity required calm. What do you need from me? She asked. I need a human face on this story, Kit said. I have documents and financial records and a contracting paper trail. What I don't have is someone who can look at a camera and make a person who is 55 years old and has never heard of NAVFAC or Howcrest Industries understand exactly what is being taken and exactly who it is being taken from. Another pause. You have 24 dogs and 17 veterans whose lives are directly connected to this facility. I have a story that needs exactly that. Sloan looked at Rex, who had not moved from beside her chair since she sat down. When can you be here? She asked. I'm 40 minutes out, Kit said. I was hoping you'd say yes. Sloan ended the call and looked at Carol, who had 3 pages of legal notes in front of her, and the expression of an attorney who had encountered a situation that was significantly larger than it had appeared 30 minutes ago and was already processing the implications. Rear Admiral Richard Vance, Carol said, NAVFAC, and Gerald Hoffman from the DoD Realignment Office is the contracting liaison, which means the man who stood in this kennel this morning and told us about case-by-case accommodation arrangements knew exactly why this facility is being cleared and chose not to say it. And Commander Lawson? Sloan asked carefully. Carol considered. That's the question, isn't it? Was he part of the plan or just the messenger? Sloan thought about the shift in Lawson's voice when he set down the script, the specific quality of a man doing a part of his job he did not particularly like. She thought about the way he had looked at the 24 dogs before he walked out, the way he had looked at Rex. I don't know about Lawson, she said. She said it honestly because she did not know for certain, and because 4 months of working with dogs had taught her the difference between a person who was causing harm and a person who was carrying it without understanding its full weight. But she was going to find out. Rex put his chin on her knee. She put her hand on his head and looked at Carol and felt the 4 months and the 219 dogs and the 11 acres settle into the specific configuration of something that had become a fight. A real fight. The kind where the other side had more money and more institutional authority and more official documentation, and the only things you had were the truth and the people who needed you to win. She had fought with less. 38 minutes until Kit Brennan gets here, Sloan said. Let's get to work. Kit Brennan was 29 years old and drove a 7-year-old Honda with a cracked dashboard and 3 press credentials hanging from the rearview mirror. She walked into the office with a recorder, a laptop, and the specific energy of a person who had been sitting on a story for 6 months, and had finally found the person who could make it matter. She shook Sloane's hand. She shook Carol's hand. She looked at Rex, who was still positioned beside Sloane's chair, and she said, "He hasn't moved, has he?" "No," Sloane said. "They know when something's wrong," Kit said. It was not a question. "They always know," Sloane said. "Sit down." Kit sat. She opened her laptop and turned it so Sloane and Carol could see the screen. What populated on it was a financial network map, the kind that investigative journalists built over months of document requests and database cross-referencing. A web of incorporated entities and contract awards and registered agents that connected to each other in ways that individually looked unremarkable and collectively looked like the architecture of something designed to avoid being seen clearly. Howcrest Industries, Kit said, pointing to the note at the center. Incorporated in Delaware 18 months ago. Registered agent is a law firm in Arlington that represents 14 other companies with federal contracting relationships. No public executives, no website, no press presence. She moved her finger. The beneficial ownership structure runs through 2 holding companies to 3 individuals. It took me 4 months to trace it because each layer was registered in a different state with a different law firm. "Who are the 3 individuals?" Carol asked. Kit pointed to 3 names on the right side of the map. Sloane did not recognize the first 2. The third one she recognized immediately. "Gerald Hoffman," she said. "Gerald Hoffman," Kit confirmed. "The man who stood in your kennel this morning. He is not simply a DoD-based realignment liaison. He is a 23% beneficial owner of the company that was awarded the contract to develop the land your program sits on." She looked at Sloane directly. "He delivered your eviction notice this morning as a federal employee while holding a financial interest in the company that benefits from your eviction. That is a federal conflict of interest violation, potentially criminal." Carol's pen had not stopped moving since Kit started talking. "And Vance?" Sloane asked. "Rear Admiral Richard Vance, Naval Facilities Engineering Systems Command, is the contracting officer of record on all 3 parcel awards." Kit pulled up a second document. "He is not a named beneficial owner. What he is a limited partner in a private equity fund that holds a 17% stake in one of the 2 holding companies in the Howcrest ownership chain." She paused to let that settle. "He structured it so that his name does not appear in the Howcrest documentation, but the money flows to him through the fund." "How did you find it?" Carol asked. "His financial disclosure forms," Kit said. "Federal officers above a certain rank are required to disclose investment holdings. Vance disclosed the private equity fund as a standard investment. What he did not disclose, because the fund's underlying holdings are not required to be itemized at the individual investment level, is that the fund holds the Howcrest stake." She looked at her laptop. What I do not have yet is a verified account from someone inside the process who can confirm the connection between the contract award and the specific targeting of these parcels." She leaned forward. "Did Lawson say anything today that suggested he understood what the repurposing was actually for?" Sloane thought about the script and the shift away from it. The careful eyes. The look at the dogs before he walked out. "He knew something wasn't clean," she said slowly. "He didn't say it, but the way he was not saying it was specific." "Meaning he was managing information," Kit said. "Meaning he was managing himself," Sloane said. "Those are different things." Kit looked at her for a moment. "You've been working with people and animals for 4 months." "Yes, and you think there's a difference between a man who is hiding something and a man who is carrying something he doesn't fully understand yet?" "I think Reese Lawson was told to deliver a notice, and he delivered it," Sloane said. "Whether he knows the full architecture of what he's participating in is a different question." She looked at Rex. "The dogs know the difference too." Rex didn't like Lawson's presence, but he didn't respond to Lawson the way he responds to a genuine threat. He responded to the situation. Kit absorbed that. She looked at Carol. I need to publish this story before the 30-day mark. Specifically, I need to publish it in time for it to reach federal oversight channels before the compliance deadline becomes legally binding. She looked at Sloan. That gives us approximately 3 weeks. What do you need from me in 3 weeks? Access, Sloan said, to this facility, to the veterans who use it, to the program documentation. I want you to show people exactly what is being taken and exactly why it matters. She paused. And if Lawson comes back, I want to be here when he does. Kit left 2 hours later with 200 pages of program documentation and an appointment for the following morning when 3 of the veterans with active placement partnerships would be at the facility for their regular sessions. Sloan walked her to her car and watched her drive out through the gate and stood in the facility yard in the early evening quiet with Rex beside her. She thought about Howe Crest Industries and $480 million and 3 parcels in 3 Virginia counties, and the specific arithmetic of what it cost to make veteran service programs disappear when disappearing them was worth that kind of money. Her phone rang at 11:47. Unknown number, she answered. Miss Garrett. The voice was male, careful, and she recognized it before he said his name. This is Reese Lawson. She said nothing. She waited. I'm calling from a personal phone, he said, not a government line. I noticed, she said. A pause, long enough that she could hear him choosing his words with the care of a man who had been in environments where precise language was survival. I became aware this afternoon of information regarding the repurposing contract that was not included in the briefing materials I received before the site visit this morning. I want to be clear that I delivered the compliance notice in good faith based on the information I was given. What information were you not given? Sloan asked. Another pause. Longer. She could hear him deciding how much of what he knew was safe to say on a personal phone to a woman he had met 6 hours ago. The contracting officer of record on the parcel repurposing is a senior officer in my operational chain, he said finally. If there are irregularities in the contracting process, that is a matter for federal oversight, not for a site visit compliance officer. He stopped. I am not in a position to provide information that could compromise an ongoing review. But there is an ongoing review, Sloan said. The silence confirmed it before he spoke. 6 weeks ago, the Naval Inspector General opened a preliminary inquiry into NAVFAC contracting practices. Anonymous referral. I'm not the source, but I became aware of it when my commanding officer was interviewed as part of the fact-finding process. He paused. The accelerated timeline for this facility was set the same week the inquiry opened. That's not coincidence. Sloan absorbed that. The pieces were connecting faster now. What can you tell me? She asked. I can tell you that I would recommend consulting with your legal counsel about the formal dispute process for base realignment decisions, and I would recommend doing it promptly. Our attorney is already on it, Sloan said. Good. Another pause. The dogs, the active service partnerships, the medical rehabilitation cases. He stopped again. She waited. 30 days is not a realistic timeline for responsible transition of those animals. I am aware of that. Are you aware of what happens to a veteran with a traumatic brain injury when you remove the dog that is the reason he sleeps? Sloan said. She did not say it with heat. She said it as information. The way she said things that needed to be received clearly. Lawson was quiet for 4 seconds. I hear you, he said, and the way he said it was not a script. Ms. Garrett, I cannot tell you anything else on this call, but I want you to know that what you're doing with this program is something that matters. What happens to it matters. A pause. I'm sorry about the way this morning went. You can do something about that, Sloan said. You can figure out exactly how much you know and decide whether you're going to be part of the problem or part of the solution. Those are the only 2 positions available. He did not respond immediately. When he did, it was 2 words. I know. Then the line was quiet. Sloan held the phone and looked at the kennel, at the lights still on in the evening, at the 24 dogs who were in their runs or their yard spaces going about the end of their day with the specific, unhurried quality of animals who were in the right place with the right people and had no reason to be anywhere else. Rex was watching her. He had been watching her when she answered the phone, and he was still watching her now with the patient attention of an animal who had decided she was worth monitoring. "He's going to come back," she told Rex. She did not know if she meant it as a warning or a prediction, or both. Rex made a sound that could have been acknowledgement. Sloan looked at the sky above the 11 acres. Clear, cold, the kind of night where you could see every star if you looked long enough. 30 days, $480 million. One rear admiral who had been corrupt for 33 years, and 24 dogs who knew when something was wrong. She put her hand on Rex's head. "Let's see what happens next," she said. 3 things happened the next morning, within 90 minutes of each other, and the sequence of them changed the shape of everything that followed. The first was that Kit Brennan arrived at 8:15 with her recorder and her laptop, and found 4 veterans already in the facility yard, none of whom were scheduled until 10 o'clock. They had called each other the night before after 2 of them received a courtesy notification letter from the DoD informing them that their service animal placement partnership would be subject to transfer to an alternate facility effective in 30 days. None of them had been told about the transfer in person. None of them had been told the name of the alternate facility. All 4 of them had driven to Iron Ridge because it was the only place that felt like the right place to be when something that mattered was being taken. Kit looked at the 4 men and women in the yard, at the dogs who had come to them immediately and positioned themselves in the specific configurations of animals who had spent months learning exactly what each person needed and were currently providing it without being asked. She opened her laptop and said quietly to nobody in particular, "There it is." The second thing that happened was that Carol Winters called at 8:50 with the results of an overnight legal research session and told Sloan that the formal dispute process for base realignment decisions had a provision she had not known existed. A community impact review trigger that required a 60-day hold on any compliance deadline if the displacing action could be shown to affect more than a threshold number of federally connected service beneficiaries. The program served 17 veterans with active DoD service partnerships. The threshold was 12. "We can force a 60-day hold," Carol said. "It doesn't stop the process, but it buys us time. And time is what changes these situations." "File it today," Sloan said. "Already drafted," Carol said. "I need your signature and Maggie's in the next 2 hours." "We'll be here," Sloan said. The third thing was Colonel Brennan Stafford walking through the front gate at 9:20 in full Desert Storm veteran regalia, which meant he had come from something official and had detoured here on purpose. Sloan saw him from across the yard. He stopped at the gate and looked at her with the ice-blue eyes that had assessed tank positions in Iraqi desert 33 years ago and were now assessing this situation with the same systematic precision. He did not wave. He did not call out. He just stood there and waited for her to decide whether he came in or stayed out. It was a very specific thing to do. It was the thing a person did when they knew something important and needed to deliver it in person and understood that the delivery mattered as much as the information. Sloan nodded toward the kennel office. Wolf crossed the yard. Rex watched him approach with the considering attention of a dog who had seen this man every Saturday for 4 months and had already decided he was acceptable. Inside the office, Wolf closed the door. He pulled a folded document from his jacket and set it on the desk. "Richard Vance," he said, "Rear Admiral, NAVFAC, the man whose office issued your eviction notice." Sloan looked at the document. It was old, photocopied multiple times, the kind of paperwork that survived in someone's personal files long after the official records had been archived or destroyed. "I served with Vance in Desert Storm," Wolf said, "1st Armored Division, January through March 1991. He was my logistics officer. Smart, efficient, and dirty. He sat down across from Sloan. February 26th, 1991, 2 days before the ceasefire. We took an Iraqi supply depot outside Basra. Standard operation: secure the facility, catalog the assets, turn it over to the follow-on units. Wolf's jaw tightened. Vance found 3 pallets of electronics, civilian grade, high-end, worth maybe $200,000 on the black market. He tried to file it as combat loss, write it off as destroyed in the engagement. I caught him loading it into a truck at 0300 hours. "What did you do?" Sloan asked. I reported him. Full documentation, chain of command, the works. And Vance had a cousin in the Pentagon, someone with enough pull to make the investigation go away. He got a reprimand, letter in his file, no discharge, no court-martial, nothing that would actually stop his career. Wolf tapped the document. "This is the incident report I filed. The original got buried. This is my copy. I've kept it for 33 years because I knew that a man who would steal in a war zone wouldn't stop stealing just because the war ended." He looked at Sloan directly. "If Richard Vance is behind this eviction, there's money involved, significant money, and he's been refining his methods for 3 decades. Sloan picked up the document and read it. Detailed, specific, the kind of report that would end a career if anyone with authority had been willing to act on it. "Why are you giving this to me now?" she asked. "Because Kit Brennan called me last night," Wolf said. "Told me about Howcrest Industries and the $480 million contract. Asked me if I knew anything about Vance that might be relevant to her investigation." He smiled without humor. "I told her I knew exactly one thing about Richard Vance. He's been dirty since 1991, and he's very good at not getting caught. Which means if you're going to fight him, you need to understand you're not fighting one corrupt officer. You're fighting a system he spent 33 years learning how to manipulate. So, how do we beat him?" Sloan asked. Wolf stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the yard where the 4 veterans were working with their dogs, and Kit was filming the interactions on her phone. "You do what I should have done in 1991, he said. "You don't fight him through the system. You fight him by making the system irrelevant. You make this so public and so clear that nobody with authority can ignore it without destroying their own credibility." He turned back to Sloan. "I taught you that terrain determines tactics. This is terrain. Vance controls the military bureaucracy. He controls the contracting process. He probably controls half the people who would be reviewing any formal complaint." Wolf pointed out the window. "But he doesn't control the story. He doesn't control what happens when 17 veterans and 24 service dogs and 1 decorated combat veteran make the case that what he's doing is wrong." Sloan looked at the yard, at Marcus with Ranger, at Patricia with Luna, at Owen Bishop working balance exercises with Harbor, at Kit documenting all of it with the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what she was building. "You're saying we go public," Sloan said. "I'm saying you already are public. Kit's story is going to break in less than 3 weeks. The question is whether you're going to wait for it to break or whether you're going to take control of the narrative first." "How?" Wolf sat back down. "You lead," he said simply. "Not Maggie, not Carol, not me. You. You're the face of this. 28 years old, Purple Heart, 12 confirmed kills in Kandahar. Came home wounded, and instead of taking the instructor job at Fort Benning, you came here to train service dogs for veterans with PTSD. He leaned forward. "That's the story, Sloan. Not the bureaucracy, not the contracting fraud, not the legal process. The story is you, and the story is what you're willing to do to protect these veterans and these dogs." Sloan was quiet for a long moment. "What if I'm not ready to be the story?" she asked. "Then you're going to lose," Wolf said, "because Vance is betting you're not ready. He's betting you'll stay quiet and work through channels and let the process grind you down until the 30 days are up and you're legally required to leave." He stood up. "But if I'm reading you correctly, and I think I am, You didn't come here to hide from what you did in Afghanistan. You came here to find out what comes after killing. And what comes after killing is this: standing up when something wrong is happening and saying no, out loud, where everyone can hear it. Rex had been lying at Sloane's feet during the entire conversation. Now he stood up and pressed his head against her hand. She looked at Wolf. If I do this, Vance is going to come after me, personally. Yes, Wolf said, he will. He's going to dig into my military record. He's going to look for anything he can use to discredit me. Probably. He's going to make this about me instead of about the facility. That's what people like Vance do, Wolf said. They make it personal because personal is easier to destroy than institutional. But here's what he's not expecting. You're not afraid of it being personal. You've already decided this matters more than your comfort. Sloane thought about Kandahar, about 40 minutes of sustained fire, about 12 kills, about the bullet through her shoulder and the choice to come here instead of going to Fort Benning, about Marcus sleeping for 11 minutes with Ranger across his legs. All right, she said, I'll lead. Wolf nodded once, sharp, the nod of a commander receiving confirmation that an order had been understood. Then let's get to work. Commander Reese Lawson came back at 11:37. Sloane saw him pull up in a civilian truck, not a government SUV. No uniform, jeans, and a gray jacket. He got out and stood at the gate and did not move forward. The same thing Wolf had done 2 hours earlier, waiting for permission. It told her something. She walked to the gate. Rex came with her. The dog had not left her side since Wolf arrived, and she suspected he was not going to leave her side for the rest of the day. Commander, she said. Ms. Garrett. Lawson looked past her at the yard, at the 4 veterans, at Kit with her camera, at the whole scene that had assembled itself in the hours since his phone call last night. You have press here already. I have veterans here, Sloane said. Kit's here because of them. Lawson looked at Kit. Kit looked back at him with the specific attention of a journalist who had spent 6 months building a story and had just watched one of its central figures walk through a gate in civilian clothes on a Friday morning when he should have been at his desk at NAVFAC. Commander Lawson, Kit called across the yard. Kit Brennan, Appalachian Tribune. Would you like to comment on your role in the Howcrest Industries land acquisition process? Lawson's face did not change, but something behind it did. A fractional shift. The look of someone who had just confirmed that the situation was exactly as complicated as he had feared it was. He looked at Sloane. She knows, Sloane said. She knew before I did. Lawson was quiet for a moment, standing at the gate with the dogs moving around the yard and the veterans watching from across the space and Kit Brennan recording everything. Then he looked at Kit. I'm not in a position to comment on contracting processes, he said. Are you in a position to comment on why you're here without Gerald Hoffman? Kit asked. Personal visit. To a facility you issued an eviction notice to yesterday? I came to look at the program. He said it simply, without the careful scaffolding of official language, which meant it was probably the truest thing he had said since he arrived. I came to actually look at it. Kit let that sit in the recording without commenting on it. Lawson turned to Sloane. May I? He nodded toward the yard, toward the veterans, toward the dogs. Sloane considered him for a moment. Rex was watching him, not with the alert tension from yesterday, with something else, the considering attention of a dog reserving judgment. Stay out of Kit's way, Sloane said, and don't say anything to the veterans that sounds like it came from a DOD briefing document. Understood, he said. She watched him walk toward the yard, toward Marcus and Patricia and Owen and the 4th veteran, a woman named Claire Dennison, who had served in Iraq and now worked with a golden retriever named Cooper, who helped manage her panic attacks in crowds. Lawson stopped at a respectful distance and crouched down to let the nearest dog approach him on its own terms. It was Ranger, Marcus's German shepherd, the dog who had taught Marcus how to sleep again. Ranger crossed the distance slowly, methodical, assessing. He pressed his nose against Lawson's hand with the considering attention of a dog deciding what he thought about someone. Lawson stayed still and let him decide. He did not reach out. He did not push. He simply stayed present and let the dog run his assessment. Ranger leaned in. Sloan watched that and felt something shift very slightly in her calculation of Reese Lawson. The way things shifted when a dog told you something that overrode what you thought you knew. Wolf appeared at her shoulder. He came back, Wolf said quietly. He came back, Sloan confirmed. That's either very good or very complicated. Both, Sloan said. In this situation, both is what we have to work with. Lawson stayed for 3 hours, moving between veterans, watching the dogs work with the quiet attention of someone learning a language he had not known existed. He watched Marcus achieve that 11-minute sleep, with Ranger providing the weight and pressure that rewrote 4 years of insomnia. Sloan saw Lawson check his watch, saw him count the minutes, saw the moment he understood exactly what he was witnessing. He watched Patricia Quinn complete her measured circuits with Luna, each lap another small reclamation of the ground PTSD had taken from her. He watched Owen work with Harbor on balance exercises and saw the moment when the dog, unbidden and untrained for this specific response, positioned himself as counterweight during one of Owen's anxiety lockups. The dog adapting, learning, becoming more than his training. At 2:15, Lawson came to find Sloan in the kennel office, where she was updating placement documentation. Ms. Garrett, she looked up. Vance's office contacted mine this morning, he said. They were asking about the status of the site visit documentation and whether there had been any complications. What did you tell them? Sloan asked. That the notice had been delivered and the compliance timeline was in effect. He said it straight, without hedging. That was true when I said it. The filing your attorney submitted this morning changes that. The Community Impact Review trigger forces a 60-day hold. Our attorney filed it 2 hours ago, Sloan said. Lawson nodded slowly. Vance's office is going to push back on the trigger qualification. They'll argue the threshold calculation. They'll find a procedural basis to challenge the hold. Let them argue it, Sloan said. Carol has the partnership documentation for all 17 veterans. The threshold is 12. There's no legitimate argument. They will find one, Lawson said, not as a threat, as information. Vance has people in the Realignment Review Division who have been managing these parcel clearances for 18 months. They know the process. They will find a procedural basis to challenge the hold. He looked at her. You need someone on the inside of that process who can flag the challenge before it succeeds. Sloan looked at him for a long moment. Are you offering to be that person? I'm telling you that the challenge is coming and that the 60-day hold is not as secure as your attorney may believe. He met her eyes. What I do with that information is a separate question that I have not fully answered for myself yet. It was the most honest thing he had said to her. She appreciated it precisely because it was honest, and not because it was reassuring, which it was not. Sit down, she said. He sat. I'm going to ask you a direct question, she said, and I'm asking it because the answer determines how I think about everything else in this situation. Ask it, he said. When you came here yesterday and delivered that notice, what did you know about Howcrest Industries? He was quiet for 4 seconds. She counted them. I knew the contracting entity name, he said finally. It appeared in the briefing materials as the development company awarded the parcel repurposing contract. I did not know the ownership structure. I did not know Hoffman's connection to it. A pause. I did not know Vance's connection to it. But you knew something was irregular, Sloan said. I knew the accelerated timeline was irregular, he said. Best realignment compliance deadlines are typically 90 to 120 days. 30 days is used for emergency national security repurposing. There was no national security designation on this parcel. He looked at his hands. I asked about it. I was told the timeline was set at the contracting level and was not subject to field review. And you delivered the notice anyway, Sloan said. I delivered the notice, he confirmed. He did not explain it or justify it. He just said it and let it sit there, which told her he had already judged himself for it and did not need her to do it for him. What changed between yesterday morning and last night, she asked. I ran Howcrest, he said, on my own time, on my own system, what I could access from my clearance level. The ownership structure doesn't appear in the documentation I can reach, but the contracting history does. He looked up. Howcrest has been awarded 3 parcel repurposing contracts in this region in the past 18 months, all 3 through Vance's office, all 3 on accelerated timelines, all 3 on parcels previously occupied by veteran support programs. He paused. That's not a pattern that happens by accident. Kit Brennan appeared in the office doorway. She had been quiet enough that neither of them had heard her approach, and Sloan suspected that was intentional. Her recorder was in her hand. She was not hiding it. Commander Lawson, Kit said, everything you just said is on this recording. I want you to know that before we continue. Lawson looked at the recorder. Then he looked at Kit. Then he looked at Sloan. I know, he said. It was the same 2 words he had said on the phone the night before, and they carried the same weight. The 3rd parcel, Kit said, stepping into the office. The one that was cleared 9 months ago in Clearfield County. Do you know what program was operating there? A therapeutic service program for veterans with PTSD, Lawson said. I pulled the realignment record this morning. The program director filed a community impact review trigger, Kit said. The same provision Miss Garrett's attorney filed this morning. The challenge came from Vance's office within 72 hours. They argued that the therapeutic participants did not qualify as federal service beneficiaries under the applicable definition because the program accepted both DOD and VA referrals, and the definition in the regulation specifies DOD referrals only. She paused. The hold was lifted. The program was cleared on schedule. Sloan felt the specific cold of a person understanding that a trap they thought they had found a way around had already been sprung on someone else first. She looked at the filing documentation on her desk, the 17 partnership packages, the threshold calculation that had seemed unassailable an hour ago. What is the referral source for your 17 veterans? Lawson asked. He was already seeing it. Mixed, Sloan said. The word came out flat. DOD and VA referrals. The program accepts both because the need is the same, regardless of which system refers them. How many are DOD-only referrals? Kit asked. Sloan went to her files. She went through them with the focus speed of a person who knew their records well and was now reading them against a framework she had not known to apply when she organized them. She counted. She recounted. She looked up. 9, she said. 3 below the threshold. The silence in the office had the specific quality of silence in a small room where everyone has simultaneously arrived at the same bad place and needs a moment to process being there. They already knew, Lawson said. It came out quietly, almost to himself. When they set the parcel target, they checked the referral breakdown. They knew the DOD only count would fall below 12. He looked at Sloan. That's why they chose this facility. Not just the land. The land could have been any of a dozen parcels. They chose this one because the community impact provision could be neutralized. Kit was typing. Her fingers were moving fast, and her expression was the expression of a journalist who had just watched the center of a story reveal itself. We need the Clearfield documentation, Carol Winters said from the doorway. She had arrived in the last 2 minutes, phone in hand, and had heard enough. The challenge ruling from Vance's office. If they use the same definitional argument, and if we can show they knew the referral breakdown before selecting the parcel, that's evidence of deliberate targeting. The ruling will be in the federal contracting dispute record, Kit said. I can file a records request today. It will take weeks, Carol said. I have a source inside the contracting review division, Kit said. It will take less than that. Sloan was still holding the 9 partnership files. 9 was not 12. The hold was not going to hold, and Vance's office was going to challenge it within 72 hours because they had done it before and they knew exactly how. She set the files down. She looked at Lawson. You said I need someone inside the process who can flag the challenge before it succeeds. I'm asking you now, are you that someone? Lawson looked at her steadily. If I provide documentation to support your position, I will be identified as the source. My career in Naval Special Warfare Command will end, possibly my career in the Navy. I understand that, Sloan said, and if I don't provide it, your 60-day hold collapses in 72 hours, and you're back to the 30-day timeline with no legal recourse. Also true. He was quiet for a long moment. Rex had come into the office and was sitting between Sloan and Lawson, looking at both of them with the brown eyes that missed nothing. I have a brother, Lawson said finally. Elliot. He's 39, Marine Corps, EOD. He took shrapnel from an IED in Baghdad in 2008, lost his left hand, severe PTSD. He's been on a wait list for a service dog program for 2 years. He looked at the yard through the window. The Clearfield County program was his closest option. When it closed 9 months ago, he went back on the wait list. National Registry. He's currently number 47. Lawson turned back to Sloan. I delivered the compliance notice that cleared Clearfield County. I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but that doesn't change the fact that I did it. My brother is on a wait list because I helped close the program that could have helped him. He stood up. So yes, Ms. Garrett, I am that someone. Tell me what you need. What Sloan needed was evidence that Richard Vance had not simply awarded contracts to Howcrest Industries, but had deliberately selected facilities whose legal protections could be systematically dismantled. What she needed was documentation showing that the parcel selection had been calculated, methodical, and designed to circumvent the very safeguards that were supposed to protect veteran service programs from exactly this kind of displacement. What she needed was something that existed inside NAVFAC headquarters in a filing system that required federal security clearance to access. And she needed it before Vance's office challenged the community impact hold, which meant she had approximately 48 hours. The parcel selection analysis, Lawson said. He was standing at the office window, looking at the yard where Marcus had woken from his 11-minute sleep and was now walking slowly with Ranger at his side. It's a document that NAVFAC contracting officers are required to produce for any land acquisition over a certain dollar threshold. It evaluates multiple potential sites against a standardized set of criteria: infrastructure access, soil composition, existing utility connections, environmental impact. He turned back to Sloan. And legal mitigation potential. Define that, Wolf said. He had been standing quietly in the corner of the office, listening to everything, and now he stepped forward with the focused attention of a man who had just heard the phrase that mattered. The degree to which applicable regulatory provisions can be satisfied without prohibitive legal challenge, Lawson said. It's supposed to measure things like zoning compliance and environmental permitting, whether a site can be developed without triggering reviews that would delay the project. But it could also measure whether a facility's veteran population has the right referral breakdown to fall below the community impact threshold, Kit said. Yes. And if that analysis exists, Wolf said slowly, and if it shows that this facility was scored higher than other potential sites specifically because the referral breakdown made it legally vulnerable, that's evidence of targeted circumvention. That's exactly what it is, Carol said. That document would convert this from a contracting irregularity into fraud. Deliberate fraud with documented intent. Sloan looked at Lawson. Where is it? Vance's office, 4th floor, NAVFAC headquarters, filing cabinet in his admin suite. The analyses are classified documents. They're not digitized, paper only, locked storage. Who has access? Vance, his deputy, his senior admin officer. and anyone with the right security clearance and a legitimate operational need. Do you have the right clearance? Yes. Do you have a legitimate operational need? Lawson was quiet for a moment. No, he said, not one that would survive review if anyone asked why I was accessing documents related to a parcel I've already delivered compliance notice for. Sloan absorbed that. She looked at Wolf. Wolf was watching her with the ice-blue eyes that had assessed impossible situations in Iraqi desert and had learned to find the angles that were not immediately visible. You're thinking about it, Wolf said. It was not a question. Yes. Going into that building and taking those documents would be breaking and entering a federal facility, theft of classified materials, possibly espionage, depending on how Vance's lawyers wanted to argue it. I know. You'd be looking at federal prison, minimum 5 years, possibly 15. I know that too, Wolf leaned against the desk. Then let me be very clear about what I'm about to say. I am not advising you to do this. I am not encouraging you to do this. I am simply observing that you have a particular set of skills that were developed over 2 tours in Afghanistan, and that those skills included infiltration, reconnaissance, and operating in hostile environments without support. He looked at her directly. And I am observing that you have 48 hours to acquire documentation that exists in a physical location that is accessible to someone with the right training and the willingness to accept the consequences if the operation fails. Sloan thought about Kandahar, about moving through Taliban compounds in darkness, about the specific patience required to get into position and hold it for hours while waiting for the shot, about the training that had taught her to be invisible when invisible was the only thing keeping you alive. She thought about Marcus sleeping, about Patricia walking, about Owen finding his balance, about 17 veterans whose lives were connected to this facility in ways that could not be transferred to a case-by-case accommodation arrangement 4 hours away. She thought about Elliot Lawson, number 47 on a national wait list, waiting for something his brother had unknowingly helped destroy. I need the building access schedule, she said to Lawson. Security patrol timing, camera positions, lock types, everything you know about the physical layout of Vance's admin suite. Lawson pulled out his phone. I can get you all of that, he said, but I need you to understand something first. If you do this and you're caught, I cannot protect you. I cannot testify that I helped you. I will be questioned, and I will have to answer honestly about every conversation we've had. I understand. And if you're not caught, if you succeed, and if the documents you acquire become evidence in an investigation, someone is going to ask how they were obtained. The chain of custody will be examined. You could still face charges even if the documents prove everything we think they prove. I understand that too, Sloan said. She looked at Kit. If I do this, you cannot know about it in advance. You cannot be in a position where anyone can argue you were complicit. Agreed, Kit said, but I need you to know that if you get caught, I will write the story anyway. I will make sure everyone understands why you did it and what you were trying to protect. That's all I'm asking. Wolf stood up. You'll need a vehicle, not yours, not one that can be traced to this facility. I have a truck, Lawson said, registered to a rental property I own in Norfolk. No connection to NAVFAC. Extraction plan, Wolf said. If something goes wrong, you need a way out that doesn't lead back here. I'll handle it, Sloan said. Carol Winters had been making notes on her legal pad throughout this entire conversation. Now she looked up. I am obligated to tell you that what you are discussing constitutes multiple federal crimes, and that as your legal counsel, I cannot advise you to proceed. She set down her pen. I am also obligated to tell you that if you proceed despite my advice, and if you are caught, I will represent you to the fullest extent of my ability, and I will make the argument that what you did was necessary to prevent a greater harm. Noted, Sloan said. Rex had been lying at her feet during the entire conversation. Now he stood up and pressed his head against her hand. The same gesture he had made when Lawson and Hoffman first delivered the eviction notice. the same weight and warmth. She looked at the gray muzzle and the brown eyes in the 12 years of service that had taught this dog to read situations that humans missed. "You coming with me?" she asked him quietly. Rex's tail moved once, slow and certain. "All right then," Sloan said. "Let's go to work." The infiltration happened 48 hours later, on the second night after the community impact filing. Sloan drove Lawson's truck. He had left it at a shopping center parking lot 3 miles from NAVFAC headquarters, with the keys in a magnetic box under the rear bumper, and a text message containing only the lot number and the GPS coordinates. She arrived at NAVFAC at 0247 hours. The building was federal architecture, concrete and glass, security lighting that created hard shadows and deep pools of darkness. 2 cameras at the main entrance, 1 camera covering the north parking area, none on the south side where the loading dock access was located because that side faced a secured military installation, and security had apparently decided that constituted sufficient protection. It did not. Sloan had studied the building layout for 6 hours. She had memorized the security patrol schedule that Lawson had provided. She knew that the guards did a full perimeter check every 90 minutes, and that they were currently on minute 37 of their rotation, which meant she had 53 minutes before they came around again. She moved along the south wall using the shadows the way she had used them in Kandahar. Patient, invisible, no wasted movement. The loading dock door had a standard commercial lock. She bypassed it in 42 seconds using the technique she had learned from a combat engineer in Afghanistan who had taught her that most locks were designed to keep honest people out and would yield to someone who understood their mechanics. Inside, the building was dark and quiet. Emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate by. She took the south stairwell to the 4th floor. No cameras in the stairwell, because fire code required unobstructed emergency egress, and cameras constituted obstructions, according to some federal regulation that had been written before anyone considered that the lack of surveillance might constitute a security vulnerability. The 4th floor corridor was empty. Vance's admin suite was at the east end. The door was locked, but it was a standard office lock, and it yielded to the same technique as the loading dock in 38 seconds. The filing cabinet was exactly where Lawson said it would be. 3 drawers, combination lock. The combination was Vance's service number, which Lawson had found in the base personnel directory, and which Vance had apparently never changed because people who had been getting away with things for 33 years often stopped being careful about the small details. The parcel selection analysis was in the 2nd drawer. 14 pages. 7 facilities evaluated. Each one scored across 12 criteria on a scale of 1 to 10. Infrastructure access, soil composition, utility connections, environmental impact, development timeline, cost projection, community resistance potential, legal mitigation potential. Iron Ridge had scored highest overall, 9.2 out of 10. The legal mitigation potential score was 9.8. The notation in that section was handwritten. Vance's handwriting, according to the signature at the bottom of the analysis. Mixed DOD/VA referrals plus aging documentation gaps equals optimal challenge profile for community impact provision. Threshold defeat probable within standard 72-hour review window. Sloan photographed all 14 pages. She used her phone in airplane mode with location services disabled and the flash turned off. She took 2 photos of each page to ensure clarity. Then she took a 3rd photo of the full document spread across the desk so that anyone reviewing the images could see they were photographs of a single continuous document and not fabricated pages that had been assembled from multiple sources. She was replacing the document in the filing cabinet when she heard voices in the corridor. Not scheduled. The security patrol was not due for another 18 minutes. She closed the filing cabinet as quietly as possible and moved to the corner of the office behind the door. If someone came in, they would see her immediately. There was no hiding place, no closet, No furniture large enough to conceal a person. The voices came closer. Two men. One of them was complaining about the coffee in the break room. The other was talking about a basketball game. They stopped outside Vance's office. Sloane heard keys, heard the lock disengage. The door opened. She had perhaps 2 seconds to make a decision. She could try to fight her way past them and run, which would trigger an immediate building lockdown and probably end with her in federal custody within 20 minutes. Or she could stay perfectly still and hope they had come for something quick and would leave without conducting a thorough search of the office. The lights came on. One of the security guards stepped into the office. He was looking at a tablet in his hand, not looking around the room, just checking something on a screen. "Yeah, Vance's office is clear," he said to his partner. "No sign of entry." "Third floor?" the partner called from the corridor. "Give me a minute." The guard with the tablet walked to the filing cabinet. He pulled on the handle. Locked. He made a note on his tablet and turned to leave. He saw Sloane. For exactly 1 second, neither of them moved. Then the guard's hand went to his radio, and Sloane knew that the next sound would be him calling for backup, and that would be the end of everything. She stepped forward and spoke very quietly. "I'm Captain Sloane Garrett, United States Army. I'm a material witness in an ongoing Naval Inspector General investigation. I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you." The guard's hand stayed on his radio, but he did not press the call button. "There is documentation in that filing cabinet that shows Rear Admiral Richard Vance deliberately targeted veteran service facilities for displacement as part of a contracting fraud scheme worth $480 million. I have photographed that documentation. If you call this in right now, that documentation will disappear before it can be secured by investigators." The guard looked at her. "At the office, at the filing cabinet." "How did you get in here?" he asked. "Does that matter more than what I just told you?" His hand tightened on the radio. "You're asking me to let a federal crime walk out of here. I'm asking you to decide whether 17 veterans matter more than procedure." For 5 seconds, neither of them moved. Then the guard's radio crackled. "Jenkins, status on 4? His thumb hovered over the call button. Sloane held his eyes. Waited. The guard exhaled slowly, keyed the radio. 4 clear, moving to 3. He stepped aside, pointed at the emergency exit down the hall. "Alarm triggers 30 seconds after you hit that door. I'll be on the 3rd floor when it goes off. They'll think it's a malfunction." He looked at her directly. "I didn't see you. Whatever you got better be worth both our careers." Sloane was already moving. She hit the emergency exit at 0321 hours. The alarm shrieked. She was in the truck and moving by 0322. She was 3 miles away and pulling into a different shopping center by 0324. She parked. She sat in the darkness. Her shoulder was screaming where the old wound had torn during the climb out. She could feel blood soaking through her shirt. Her phone buzzed. A text from Wolf. "Status?" She typed back with one hand. "Successful extraction. 32 photographs. Returning to facility." She started the truck and drove. At 0347 hours, she stumbled into Iron Ridge facility and found Wolf and Maggie waiting in the office, exactly where she knew they would be. Rex was frantic. He came to her immediately and pressed against her legs and made sounds she had never heard him make before. The specific distress of an animal who had been separated from his person and had not known if she was coming back. She handed her phone to Wolf. "Pages 7 through 11, she said. "That's the smoking gun." Then she collapsed. Maggie caught her before she hit the floor. Wolf was calling the VA doctor before Sloane's knees buckled completely. Carol Winters appeared from somewhere with towels in a first aid kit. Rex would not leave her side. He lay down beside her on the office floor and put his head on her chest and stayed there while they cut away her shirt and saw the shoulder wound bleeding freely where the stitches had ripped completely open. "You tore the rotator cuff," the doctor said when she arrived 20 minutes later. "You need surgery immediately." "Not leaving the facility," Sloane said. Her voice was fading. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the pain was coming through sharp and clean. "They'll arrest me at the hospital." "Then we do it here," the doctor said. They converted the office into a makeshift operating room. The doctor worked for 90 minutes while Wolf held Sloane's hand, and Maggie assisted, and Rex stayed positioned at her head where she could see him. When it was done and Sloane was unconscious from the anesthetic, Wolf sent the photographs to Commander Linda Ashby at the Naval Inspector General's office with a single line of text. Anonymous source, parcel selection analysis, NAVFAC contracting fraud evidence. Ashby called back in 30 minutes. "Where did these originate?" she asked. "Anonymous source," Wolf said. "These are classified NAVFAC documents. Acquisition of these constitutes a federal crime. So does authoring them with intent to defraud." Ashby was quiet for a long moment. "I'm converting this preliminary inquiry to a formal fraud investigation as of 0600 hours today. This triggers Department of Defense Inspector General review and concurrent Department of Justice referral. The contracting hold on all Howcrest-related awards is now indefinite, pending criminal review." "What about the person who acquired the documents?" Wolf asked. "If that person is a material witness to the fraud, they fall under witness protection provisions. That protection is not absolute, but it creates significant barriers to prosecution for document acquisition when the acquisition revealed criminal conduct." "Understood." "Colonel Stafford," Ashby said, "I need you to know that what you just provided is the most significant piece of evidence I've seen in 20 years of federal fraud investigation. Whoever your source is, they just ended Richard Vance's career." "Good," Wolf said. He ended the call and looked at Sloane unconscious on the makeshift surgical table, with Rex beside her and Maggie checking her vitals, and Carol documenting everything for the legal record that would inevitably follow. "Mission complete," he said quietly. Sloane woke 16 hours later in the office that had been converted into a recovery room. Her shoulder was immobilized. Her arm was in a sling. Rex was lying on the floor beside the cot, with his head on his paws, watching her with the brown eyes that had not left her face since she returned. Wolf was sitting in the chair by the window. "The IG called," he said when he saw she was awake. "Formal fraud investigation is open. DOD and Justice are both involved. Vance has been placed on administrative leave. Hoffman was indicted this morning on 4 federal counts." "The documents?" Sloane asked. Her voice was rough from the anesthetic. "Authenticated, verified, currently being reviewed by 3 separate federal investigators. Lawson? Hasn't been contacted yet. If they identify him as a source, he'll be interviewed. But the IG told me that given what the documents show, any cooperation he provided is likely to be viewed favorably." Sloane closed her eyes. "How long was I out?" 16 hours. "The facility?" "Still running. Marcus came by this morning, asked about you. I told him you were recovering from a procedure. He said Ranger knew something was wrong yesterday. The dog wouldn't settle all evening." Sloane opened her eyes and looked at Rex. "They always know," she said. Kit Brennan's story published at 13:23 hours that afternoon. The headline was simple and direct. "Purple Heart Sniper risks prison to expose $480 million Navy fraud targeting veterans." The story was 42 paragraphs. It contained the parcel selection analysis scoring criteria. It contained the Howcrest ownership chain. It contained Vance's financial connection through the private equity fund. It named Hoffman's beneficial ownership stake. It described the Clearfield County program and the 3 veterans who had lost service dog access when that facility was cleared. It quoted Sloane twice, Marcus once, Patricia once. It did not name the source of the parcel selection analysis. Kit had honored that. By 1500 hours, the story had been picked up by 4 regional outlets and 2 national wire services. By 1700 hours, it had reached the Congressional Veterans Affairs Committees in both chambers. By 1900 hours, a Senate staffer had called Carol to request program documentation for a potential oversight hearing. By 2100 hours, Admiral Richard Vance had submitted his retirement paperwork under pressure from the DoD secretary. Sloan watched it unfold from the recovery cot with her phone in her hand and Rex at her side, and the specific knowledge that she had just committed multiple federal crimes to protect 17 veterans and 24 dogs, and that the crimes had worked. Her phone rang at 22:37 hours. Unknown number, she answered. Captain Garrett. The voice was male, official. This is Special Agent Michael Torres, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. We have surveillance footage from NAVFAC headquarters showing a female individual with military bearing and visible shoulder injury accessing a restricted area on the night of November 8th. We'd like to ask you some questions about your whereabouts that evening. Sloan looked at Wolf. He was already moving, already pulling out his phone to call Carol. I'm invoking my right to counsel, Sloan said. All questions should be directed to my attorney, Carol Winters. Miss Garrett, we have evidence suggesting all questions to my attorney, Sloan said. Carol Winters. I'll have her contact information sent to you. She ended the call. They know, she said to Wolf. Of course they know, Wolf said. Vance knows, which means NCIS knows, which means they're coming. How long? Warrant will take a few hours. They'll move carefully because this is high profile now, but they'll come. Sloan struggled to sit up. Her shoulder protested sharply. I need to be ready. You're not going anywhere, Maggie said from the doorway. You just had surgery. You're staying in that bed. They're going to arrest me. Let them try, Wolf said. At 09:23 hours the next morning, 6 NCIS agents and 4 federal marshals arrived at Iron Ridge facility with a warrant for Sloan Garrett's arrest on charges of breaking and entering a federal facility, theft of classified documents, and unauthorized access to secured government information. Wolf Stafford met them at the gate in his full Desert Storm veteran uniform with 3 rows of ribbons and a Purple Heart. She's post-operative, Wolf said. Full rotator cuff repair 18 hours ago. She's not being moved. The lead agent looked at Wolf's uniform, at the Purple Heart, at the facility behind him where 24 dogs had assembled in the yard, forming the same line they had formed when Lawson first delivered the eviction notice. Colonel, obstruction of federal officers carries a 5-year sentence. I need you to step aside. No, Wolf said. Marcus appeared at Wolf's shoulder, then Patricia, then Owen, then Claire, then the other 13 veterans who had active partnerships with the facility. They formed a line between the agents and the kennel building. The dogs were behind them, silent, unified. The lead agent looked at the line of veterans and dogs. He looked at Wolf. He reached for his radio. A civilian truck pulled through the gate. Commander Reese Lawson got out. He walked to the lead agent and handed him a document. Naval Inspector General Witness Protection Order, Lawson said. Captain Garrett is a material witness in a federal fraud investigation. Any interference with her availability for testimony constitutes obstruction of a DoD investigation. The agent read the document. Where did you get this? I'm the original IG source, Lawson said. I provided the initial documentation that triggered the investigation. My career ended yesterday when Admiral Vance identified me. You can arrest me if protocol requires it, but she stays here. The agents conferred. They made calls. They reviewed the witness protection order. After 27 minutes, they withdrew. Sloan watched it from the office window with her arm in a sling and Rex at her feet, and the knowledge that 17 veterans and 1 Navy SEAL and 24 dogs had just formed a wall to protect her the same way she had tried to protect them. Wolf came to the office. They're gone, he said, but they'll be back. The witness protection order buys time, but it's not permanent. How much time? Depends on how fast the IG investigation moves. If they produce indictments quickly, the protection holds. If it drags out, NCIS will push harder on the charges against you. Sloan nodded slowly. Then we better hope the investigation moves fast. It did. Day 19. Admiral Richard Vance's forced retirement became official. Day 28. Federal judge dismissed all charges against Sloan Garrett under IG witness immunity provisions. Day 31. Halcrest Industries contract voided due to fraud at origination point. Day 44. Reese Lawson's administrative review concluded. Honorable separation from Navy. No punitive action. Full pension preserved. Day 52. Federal Review Board recommended the 11-acre parcel retain current use designation. Day 53. Iron Ridge received a 50-year lease renewal, the first in the program's 41-year history. Maggie called Sloan into the office on day 54. I'm 62 years old, Maggie said. Realistically, I have maybe 8 good years left of running this operation at full capacity. She produced a document and slid it across the desk. Partnership agreement, 50-50 co-ownership. You led the fight, you saved it, now you help me expand it. Sloan looked at the document. I'm not qualified to run a program like this. You led a combat operation against a corrupt admiral and won, Maggie said. You're qualified. Wolf was standing in the doorway. She's correct, he said. This is your next deployment, Captain. Accept the assignment. Sloan read the partnership agreement. She thought about 4 months that had turned into something permanent, about Marcus sleeping and Patricia walking and Owen finding his balance, about 24 dogs who had known when something was worth protecting. One condition, she said, we expand operations. Clearfield County reopens as a satellite facility. Additional programs across Virginia. No veteran waits 2 years for a service dog ever again. Maggie smiled. Agreed. 7 weeks later, Reese Lawson returned to Iron Ridge in civilian clothes with his brother Elliot beside him. Elliot was 39 years old, Marine Corps tattoo on his right forearm, prosthetic left hand, eyes that carried the specific distance of someone who had seen things that did not go away just because you came home. My brother says you're the one who saved this place, Elliot said to Sloan. Your brother saved it, Sloan said. I just executed the mission. She had trained a new dog for Elliot, a 3-year-old Belgian Malinois named Havoc. Specialized training for combat veterans with PTSD and physical disabilities. Elliot met Havoc in the yard. The dog assessed him for exactly 7 seconds. Then Havoc moved to Elliot's left side, the prosthetic side, and sat. Close contact. Pressure without being asked. Elliot's eyes filled. Hey, buddy, he whispered. Been waiting for you. Sloan watched from the office window with Wolf and Maggie beside her. 25 dogs in the yard now, same formation as the first day, but welcoming instead of defensive. Rex was at her feet, gray muzzle, brown eyes, tail moving slow and certain. You came here to hide, Wolf said quietly. Found out I was training for something else instead, Sloan said. What's the next objective? She looked at the facility, at the 11 acres, at the veterans and dogs and the work that would continue for the next 40 years. This, she said, every day, teaching people how to save each other. Yes, ma'am, Wolf said. I think you can do that. Sloan walked out to the yard and called formation. 25 dogs responded instantly. Perfect alignment. Marcus with Ranger, Patricia with Luna, Owen with Harbor, Elliot taking his first steps with Havoc, Rex beside her. Steady, present, the way he had been present since the first day she arrived. She put her hand on his head and looked at the gate that Gerald Hoffman and Reese Lawson had come through all those weeks ago to tell her she had 30 days. The gate was still open, but nobody was leaving. Captain Sloan Garrett had fired her last hostile shot in Kandahar province. At Iron Ridge, she discovered that saving lives was a longer war than taking them. And sometimes the most critical ground you hold is not a ridge in Afghanistan, but 11 acres in Virginia with 25 dogs who know exactly what is worth protecting. They had stood as a wall when she needed them. Now she stood with them. Every single day. No veteran left waiting. No dog without purpose. No ground surrendered.